for his contribution. The question before the Federation Chamber is that this bill be now read a second time, and I'll give the call to the member for Riverina.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and I acknowledge the presence of the Greens leader, the member for Melbourne, in the room. Recognise that he's a decent person, although philosophically we are poles apart, absolutely poles apart, and I do worry if the member for Melbourne and the Greens get any control, any say on the Treasury benches after the next election. And what we're seeing with this legislation tonight, the Treasury Laws Amendment, Reserve Bank Reforms Bill 2023, is the rub. And the rub is that the Greens are already having a large say on policy and, worryingly, disturbingly, economic policy. Because if you read the article by the Sydney Morning Herald's economics analyst Shane Wright, who's a very good journalist, it's because I trained him. I'll take some credit for that. I'm sure Shane won't mind. But this article headed Chalmers Eyes Greens Lifeline for Reserve Bank Overhaul, in which he writes that the Treasurer may drive through the biggest overhaul of the Reserve Bank in a generation with support from the Greens after the coalition walked away from the months of negotiations and concessions aimed at winning bipartisan approval for the changes. Well, yes, we did. And the member for Hume took this position for good reason. And we've seen the to and fro between Labor and the Independent Reserve Bank in recent days and times, and it's worrying. But let me go just back a little bit. I want to acknowledge also the work that Dr Philip Lowe did as the 8th RBA Governor. He was Deputy Governor under Glenn Stevens from February 2012 until he became the Governor in his own right in September 2016, and he held that august role until September 2023. And he was castigated, derided by regional newspapers for some of the comments he made about inflation, and it was difficult at the time to predict what might have happened, particularly coming out of the back of the worst of COVID-19. And Dr Lowe did a very, very good job. And Dr Lowe and I went to school together at St Michael's Regional High School. He also attended Trinity Senior High in Wagga Wagga. And it's not just that I stick up for the likes of Shane Wright and Dr Lowe, but they both have been in Wagga Wagga and they understand regionality. They understand what ordinary, everyday people expect from those in positions of power. And both of them occupied positions of power. Shane is a journalist with the Sydney Morning Herald, and Dr Lowe in his position with the RBA. And I thought Dr Lowe was unfairly treated by some sections of the media during the latter time he was the RBA Governor. And I just want to put on the record my thanks to him for his role and what he did, and for appreciating and understanding the very great pressures on regional Australians and what he did during COVID, because I think it's important to place those sorts of things on the record. And at the moment we are in an inflation crisis. At the moment we are in a crisis of confidence and a cost of living crisis. And much of it, some might even argue all of it, has been brought about by Dr Chalmers and by Labor policies. Well, he does have a...
I'll ask the member for Riverina to address the Treasurer by his title.
Sure, by the Treasurer. I'm sure he wouldn't mind if I called him Dr Chalmers, because he has got a doctorate. He has got a doctorate in economics, but I take your advice. Now, initially the Coalition supported the intent of what was laid out when Labor approached us in relation to the RBA, but in recent months there are fears that the Treasurer would sack and stack the new committee, and it has demanded that all members of the current board be moved to the new committee. Now, and I'm reading here from the Sydney Morning Herald article, Chalmers has agreed to this, but also said he would not move a board member if they preferred to shift to the governance board. And I know that the member for Hume, the shadow treasurer, has said that the treasurer, who last week said high interest rates had smashed the economy, the member for Hume said that the RBA had been undermined by the treasurer whilst trying to deflect attention from the government's role in the country's inflation. And of course, the shadow treasurer is right in that regard. We previously considered this bill very carefully, but it was agreed that the coalition would continue to engage in good faith with the government, but unfortunately the government is now not acting in good faith with either us, as the coalition, as the opposition, or indeed with the RBA. I mean, you cannot have senior members of government, and journalists don't generally make these things up, describing members of the RBA as nutters or weirdos or barbarians. I mean, that is unacceptable, completely unacceptable. In August, the Treasurer wrote to the Shadow Treasurer with some proposed amendments. The government's amendments leave open the option for a complete stitch-up of the RBA board. And following this and what I would say are extraordinary interventions of the Treasurer and his surrogates in just the past week, the coalition will not be supporting this bill. And indeed, this particular legislation implements what the government said it was going to do with the 2023 RBA review, but it goes too far, because what will happen is that we'll be seeing more and more intervention by the government into the independence of the RBA. Now, we do have a situation where the government has overseen huge increases in inflation, and then we have these incendiary comments by the Treasurer about how the RBA is smashing the economy, and then crab walking back from that in question time, where he repeatedly talks about $1 trillion of Liberal Party debt. Now, first of all, it's nowhere near $1 trillion. I see the member for Griffith agreeing with me. It's not often the member for Griffith and I agree, but it's not $1 trillion. It's not more than $1 trillion either, member for Griffith. It's nowhere near that. And also, it's not just the Liberal Party that actually did the job during COVID. It was the Liberal and the National parties together. And what we got for the debt that the nation found itself in was we saved tens of thousands of Australian lives at a time when the Chief Medical Officer of this nation, Dr Brendan Murphy, had said that we would lose, if something wasn't done, tens of thousands of Australian lives within weeks, if not months, and we acted and we did everything we could under bizarre, unique circumstances. I mean, the world had not seen a pandemic like this since the end of the First World War. Now, the First World War ended in 1918, and the pandemic of 1919-1920 took the lives of many, many people, and COVID-19 threatened to wipe out so many people off the face of this earth, and indeed it did, in fact, kill millions. They were piling up coffins in churches because the morgues were filled in Italy. They were burying people in mass graves on Manhattan Island in the United States of America, and they are two countries with good health systems. And we were faced with the prospect of what do we do as a nation? Well, we shut the borders, we put in place a national cabinet. It worked well at the start. We put in place logistics, we put in place methods to get vaccines across the nation and throughout the Pacific, and not only did we save tens of thousands of Australian lives, but we also saved millions of jobs through JobKeeper. And then we get the Treasurer of Australia standing up and saying, well, what did we get for the $1 trillion worth of Liberal Party debt? Well, he should stop saying that, because it's just not true. And what we did get was we got the second best rating in all of the world from the Johns Hopkins Centre, that institute, which measured pandemic preparedness and pandemic reaction. And we should be very proud of what we did, because there are people today alive who would not have been so but for the actions that we took. But Labor is growing more and more desperate. A tax on the RBA is as unnecessary as they are unwarranted. And of course, we see that when the Treasurer blames the RBA for, quote, smashing, unquote, the economy, we see a very desperate Treasurer, almost akin to the naughty schoolboy who didn't do his homework, who comes to class, teacher asks, where's the homework, and he says, well, the dog ate the homework. And the dog in this instance being the supposed RBA for just doing its job. Now, Michelle Bullock is doing her job. She's doing the job that she was asked to do. She was put in place by this government to do. And what we're seeing is rampant inflation. What we're seeing is an economy that is not supporting business. Each and every day I go into my country communities in the Riverina and Central West, and I see more shops putting up closed or closing down signs in their windows, and we see more and more people sleeping in their cars and tents appearing in places where people just can't simply afford either rent or accommodation or their own home. And what we're getting is a Treasurer blaming the Reserve Bank Governor and the Reserve Bank Board, and then wanting to change the rules so that they can sack said board and that they can do a complete job on the Reserve Bank Board. And this is just unheard of, unparalleled. And then what we find is the government wants to do a deal with the Greens. And here they are, the economic strategists of the nation. And that did you say harsh? Put us in charge, my goodness. Hopefully not, Member for Griffith. Hopefully not. It is a worry. It is a worry. And let me tell you, if the Greens have any say on the Treasury benches, then this nation is headed for far worse inflation figures than we have now, and far worse cost of living pressures. So the Coalition will not be supporting this bill. Labor's growing desperation is becoming more and more evident as time goes on. And I know we've got MyEFO coming up, the Mid-Year Economic and Fiscal Outlook. I know we have potentially another budget prior to the next election, but who would know? Only the Prime Minister knows when he's going to go out to Yarralumla and hand in his commission. But when he does do that, let's just hope that at the next election that we don't see a minority government in conjunction with the Greens, because at the moment we've got gas up 33%, electricity up 14%, even after the taxpayer-funded rebates of $300. I thought it was going to be $275 prior to the last election, but of course, even though that was promised on almost 100 occasions, of course, nothing was further from the truth. Rents are up 16%. I know the member for Griffiths had a lot to say about that and his solution to it, but I don't think he needs to be listened to either, because the Greens have done more to hold up local government development applications than anything, and that is causing a huge problem in local councils and states who are most responsible, let's face it, at the end of the day, for housing and the like. Health up 11%, education up 11%, food up 12%. All these costs add on and on and on to people's household mortgages, household bills. Financial and insurance up 17%. I can hear the Greens yelling out, but rest assured, if they get hold of the Treasury benches, we are all in trouble. But not just we here on Capitol Hill. ordinary, everyday mums and dads throughout Australia, families, businesses struggling to pay bills now. This bill is not good. This bill will not be supported by the coalition. We should have an independent RBA. This doesn't give us that.
And I thank the member for